7 years ago, a video exploring the Karate Kid went viral. It was a video that completely turned the narrative of a much-loved movie right on its head, and this wasn't one of those types of videos that tries desperately to convince its viewer of an opinion by reaching out for things that simply aren't there. No, this video actually brought a valid argument to the table and made everyone who loved the Karate Kid ponder a simple question. Was Daniel LaRusso actually the bully? The video did a great job of looking at the opposite side of the coin and made a lot of people, myself included, consider a point of view that they didn't even know existed. Now for this review, I'm not going to go too deep into the whole was he, wasn't he discussion, but it is something that I want to explore a little bit. But one character that I do want to focus on for this review is Daniel's sensei, Mr. Miyagi. But first, overview. Ralph Macchio plays Daniel LaRusso, a young lad from New Jersey who moves to LA with his mum so they can start a new life on the West Coast. But things immediately turn sour after Daniel gets into a fight with Johnny Lawrence, the ringleader of a group of kids from Daniel's new school who also happen to be students of the local karate dojo Cobra Kai. The bullying becomes more and more intense and Daniel soon starts getting to the end of his rope with it. He has a big emotional outburst one night with his mum, and the maintenance man, Mr. Miyagi, hears the whole thing. He takes a shine to Daniel following that, and a friendship begins to form. At the school dance, Daniel sees the opportunity for some payback and he plays a prank on Johnny, but he and his crew give chase and catch up with Daniel just outside of his home and they beat the shit out of him. Just as Johnny is about to land a finishing blow, Mr. Miyagi comes to Daniel's aid and to his surprise, he takes down Johnny and his friends with swift and precise combat. Daniel asks Miyagi if he can teach him how to fight, but Miyagi is very reluctant, knowing full well that he'd only use it to get revenge, but he does agree to go with him to Cobra Kai to ask their sensei to call his students off. Cobra Kai's sensei, John Kreese, played with an exceptional level of villainy by Martin Kove, only agrees if Daniel enters the upcoming tournament, to which Miyagi accepts. With the deal made, Miyagi takes Daniel under his wing as a student of his style of karate, and the journey to form his mind and body for the tournament begins. The Karate Kid is a staple for many kids who grew up in the 80's, as it was for me. The movie clearly sets up Daniel as the protagonist and its main focus is on this character. But re-watching it as an adult, I instead want to explore Miyagi's character because I believe that he's the true protagonist of this movie. Pat Morita plays Mr. Miyagi beautifully. He brings such warmth and humour to his character and there's this huge feeling of gravity to him. He sees the struggle that Daniel is going through and dedicates himself to training him not just for the purpose of fighting, but to bring balance to him and set him on the right path for the rest of his life. Their training doesn't get off to the best of starts. Or at least that's what Daniel thinks. For days, Miyagi gets Daniel doing hard labour at his home, sanding his floors, washing and waxing the cars, and painting the fence and the house. What Daniel believes to be exploitation and a waste of time turns out to be Miyagi building a solid foundation for him to build his karate on. The build-up of these scenes could be considered a bit hokey these days, but for me they still remain legendary. It shows Daniel that Miyagi does have his best interests at heart, and it shows us that he has a wisdom to him that goes far beyond most people. Probably the most important scene these two have together, however, is Miyagi's anniversary scene. Daniel comes over to his house one night to see Miyagi sat at his table, wearing his military uniform and drinking heavily with a picture of a beautiful woman by his side. Miyagi tells Daniel that she's his wife, but then he begins rambling incoherently, mentioning something about wife, son, and complications. Miyagi passes out and Daniel puts him to bed, and he discovers he's holding a letter. Daniel takes it and reads it, and he learns that Miyagi's wife was pregnant with their child, but both died due to complications during childbirth. Daniel also discovers that Miyagi was awarded the Medal of Honor while in the army. The emotional impact of this scene cannot be overstated. In this moment, Daniel finally realizes the depth and structure of his sensei. This man endured a heartbreak that could break any man in the world, and yet still remained strong, focused, stoic and balanced. Except of course for this one day, the only day in the whole year that he allows himself to let go and exercise all of that pain that he still carries because of that fateful day. Daniel also realizes that he's probably the closest thing Miyagi has ever had to a son, and that realization binds his respect for him even tighter. Their bond truly forms into a father-son relationship in all but blood. The bow that Daniel gives Miyagi while he sleeps it off still brings me to tears. Pat Morita earned an Oscar nomination for his portrayal of Miyagi, and there's no doubt in my mind that this scene was pivotal for that. It's frightening to think that the studio wanted to cut this scene out because they felt it slowed the pace down. Thankfully, the director fought for it to stay in. So, let's take a look at it then, shall we? Was Daniel the real bully in The Karate Kid? My personal opinion? No, it wasn't. However, he didn't do himself any favours at times. But it's also easy to say that Johnny and the other guys were the bullies, but really, they were just victims themselves. The real bully was, of course, John Kreese. Kreese is a fantastic villain. Driven by sheer determination and righteous indignation, he treats his students like army recruits and only sees karate as a way of forming yourself into a deadly weapon. Cobra Kai's motto of strike first, strike hard, no mercy says it all, and this mantra fills the heads of all his students. There is no room for personal development of mind and soul. The only thing that matters to Kreese is winning at any cost, and this narrow-minded philosophy poisons the minds of his students. Like Mr. Miyagi says,
"No such thing bad student, only bad teacher. Teacher say, student do."
Johnny Lawrence, played by William Zabka, isn't a bad guy. If anything, he just wants to succeed at school and put his reckless days behind him. But thanks to the teachings of Kreese, the arrival of Daniel gets into his head and his ego begins to take over. When he sees Daniel flirting with his recent ex Allie, played by Elizabeth Shue, he sees it as an attack, an invasion into his life, and Kreese's teachings of strike first, strike hard, no mercy take over. Johnny is Kreese's top student, and Johnny idolizes him. Why wouldn't he? Kreese's teachings have given him confidence and increased his popularity in school, so he sees Kreese as the gatekeeper to a successful life. At the end of the day, Johnny and his friends are just seriously misguided. I love The Karate Kid. It's a great story of personal growth and overcoming the seemingly impossible. No character in this is perfect. Even the highest regarded ones have their flaws, but that just makes it even sweeter. The sequels are definitely passable, but can't really hold a candle to the original. The remake didn't do anything for me at all, but I have been very pleasantly surprised by the TV series Cobra Kai. I found that it struck a perfect balance between cheesiness and seriousness, and the decision to use Johnny for their main character was a perfect one. I think the latest season tripped up over its own feet a bit, but that's another discussion. Anyway, The Karate Kid is definitely a favourite of mine, and it was a joy to watch again.